Hey, what's going on, guys? So the second piece of this week's content. Now this one is just for the training aspect. So I hope you went and watched the nutrition piece first and started to outline some, got clear on what it is exactly you're wanting to do right now. So is your pursuit fat loss? Is it maintenance of body weight? Is it muscle mass that you're after? What is it exactly that you want to pursue? So a final piece I'll add in on the nutrition, and then I'll get started on today's training, is for the nutrition. Think of it like this. Like if I ask you to construct a building and you need 10,000 bricks to construct the building, but I'm only providing you with 5,000 and I say good luck, well, we can bet on a couple things that are absolutely going to happen. Number one, if you do figure out how to have some semblance of the structure that we're after, we can pretty well guarantee that it's not going to be the most stable foundation. You might be able to skip a few pieces here and there, but it's not going to be reinforced very well. Secondly, it's a lot harder and not as secure when we're trying to build the structure without the requirements. Because the first piece of it is, do you have all the things you need to accomplish the job? That's first and foremost. So making sure that we get the nutrition piece, and then that'll kind of dictate, what are we after as far as what type of training are we going to do. Okay, so I was driving home yesterday and just thought of this, and I've given different analogies before, but I'll give you two that I think will help. Okay, or excuse me, three. Just remembered the third one. So when we're thinking about volume and intensity of training, here's a couple different analogies. Take the one with you that makes the most sense to you. So if you've ever cooked a steak before, some people have cooked a steak and they'll sear it and give it a nice crust, and just finishes the steak off real nice, right? Well, there are the people who don't even cook the thing and they just sear it real quick, and then you get to the inside and it's just you cut into it and it's not cooked at all. Might look great on the outside, has a nice crust, but it's not done enough to be safe to eat because it hasn't spent the time necessary cooking. That's the perfect analogy for volume and intensity, because when we start thinking about the intensity might be the temperature, and the volume might be how long it's at the assigned temperature. So if you have a scorching hot intensity like a sear, then okay, it's high enough intensity, probably so much so that we can't leave it on long enough to have the change take place on the inside that we're after. Okay, so I hope that clicks with you. If not, here's another way to think about it. So the other day I was cleaning my dishes before I put them in the dishwasher, and I had the water turned up. I like very hot temperature, but not so hot that I can't keep my hands under there. So the same type of analogy here is when I have the water, which is the intensity, and then the volume of water, or how long I keep the dish under there, or how long I need to keep the dish under there to keep it scrubbed, to get it to scrub clean, that is another representation of volume and intensity. If the water is so hot that I pull my hand back and I can't get the dish clean, then the intensity is too high, and the volume by default was not high enough because I had to pull out my hands and the scrub brush too soon because I couldn't get the change I wanted. All right, I'll leave you with one more of these. The second one's another cooking analogy, so that says something about me, being someone who likes to eat, obviously. So when you're cooking something, especially if you're cooking a chunk of meat, what is going to taste better? What style? Is it going to taste better if it's coming out of a crock pot, like a slow cooker? Or is it going to taste better if it's just stuck in the microwave for a minute and then it's, okay, it's edible. Maybe, hopefully it was cooked long enough before I stuck it back in the microwave. But I know I would much rather have food coming out of the crock pot because it's been at the appropriate volume, appropriate intensity. It's cooked long enough. It's nice and tender. That's the third analogy I'll leave you with as far as volumes, intensities, and just understanding that training takes time. Getting the change that you want takes time. And this whole game of training is all about delayed gratification. It's all about making investments or deposits right now. You're making investments in your future self. You are putting those deposits or miniature down payments, if you will, right now, and you may not fully realize those for a couple weeks, a couple months, years oftentimes. And there's a good representation of this when I go in the weight room and I don't need to warm up and I know I can hit certain numbers because I've made those investments over time, versus somebody who's never touched a barbell before. They haven't made the hundreds of thousands of investments that I've made through repetitions required to be able to do what I can do cold. Okay? So it is absolutely about delayed gratification. And as long as you're okay with that, understanding that it is a process and committing to that process, and then operating with the understanding that it is not going to happen overnight, that whatever it is you want is going to take some time. There's nothing we can do to accelerate it. And if you do see people out there, and you'll start to identify it once you start to develop an eye for it, is there are people who seem to make very, very rapid progress, and there's a couple things going on. Number one, you're going to have people who are brand new to training make progress at an extremely fast rate. That's, for slang term, that's newbie gains. Okay, so basically anything a newbie does will work because they've never done anything before. That works to a point, right? Like that works probably, the first 6 to 12 weeks, maybe 18 weeks. I mean, it'll work for a while. And then some things need to change, whether it's more weight on the bar, change exercises, slightly increasing the volume, whatever. Something needs to change past that point. But the other thing is, if you see people who have been training for 5 or 10 years and then out of nowhere they're just hitting crazy numbers, they're recovering very well, they're increasing their frequency in the gym, they're increasing their intensity, they're increasing their volume, like everything's increasing, that is a red flag all day that they are taking some form of PED, like performance enhancing drug, or they are on some TRT, testosterone replacement therapy. But other than that, it comes down to investing in yourself physically, also investing in yourself through recovery methods and modalities, and then also investing in yourself with the nutrition piece. And I would also throw a fourth category in there of stress management. So once you master or dramatically improve one area, keep doing that, and then start doing the second area. And then once those two areas become mastered, then you start to add in the third area. Because if you try to do everything all at once, then nothing gets mastered and nothing gets maximally improved, because you're just spreading yourself too thin. So look at the lowest hanging fruit that you can change or invest in today and get some wins. So all that at 10 minutes and 16 seconds to say, here's some ideas for training. Okay? Now, the next couple minutes of this training, these are not the only methods that you should work off of. Okay? Because I'm going to line out a couple principles, but know that as long as you're adhering to the principles, then we can get pretty creative with the methods, depending on your personality, depending on your schedule, all sorts of things. So, with the principles, we know we need to have pain-free range of motion at each joint, or as close to pain-free as we can possibly get. So from there, once we get all of the joints moving and grooving the way they should, then we can begin to slowly overload them and overload the patterns. So that core principle is called progressive overload. So progressive overload is just, good old, if you go to Google and type in Milo in the bowl, what you'll see is a little boy who would carry a calf every day to the Coliseum back during, the original Olympics. And then over time, as the calf began to grow into a bull, then Milo went from this little kid who became jacked as a grown man. So of course, Milo was not carrying a 3,000-pound bull. But the principle still stands. Progressive overload. Because the distance didn't change that Milo was carrying the calf. The frequency didn't change. He was carrying it there and back every day. So what changed? Well, what changed was the mass of the calf as it grew into a full-grown bull. Therefore, Milo had to adapt. His body had to adapt. And that can only happen at a certain rate due to our physiology. So that's why I harp on the TRT and PED stuff is, don't get discouraged when you see people who are making, they're changing, they're accelerating their physiology. So don't be discouraged when you see some people who are accelerating at too fast of a rate. Eventually you do have to pay the piper on that one. So when you see people who are, rupturing, tendons and ligaments and things like that, that's because they are accelerating their physiology beyond the nature's norm, and the muscle just cannot keep up. The muscle is outpacing the tendon and the ligament, which is really hard to do with proper natural training. So anyway, that is foundational principle number one, is progressive overload. So in some way, shape, or form, you need to overload the system to demand more of it so that the body is forced to adapt to the stress. So what I like to do is figure out a set and rep scheme for a given period of time, and then I continue to overload that gradually. And when I say gradually, I'm talking 2.5 to 5% per week increase. And then once I reach a plateau, then I will look to a different set and rep scheme, which naturally I take a very conservative approach. So I have week one's an introduction. Okay, I'm getting used to this type of training. Week two, I ramp it up, and I continue until I plateau. And then when I plateau, then I introduce something new, and then recycle over and over and over again through different set and rep schemes. Now, there is no magic set and rep schemes. It comes down to really a manipulation of a single equation, and that equation is very simple. And that equation is force equals mass times acceleration. So really, all we're doing on a day-to-day basis is we are either emphasizing a big M, which means we're going to emphasize a big mass, or the intention to move a very heavy weight and have the intent to move it as fast as we can. Or we're going to operate with a big A and a small mass, okay? And big A meaning our emphasis is going to be on acceleration. The third option that we can do is what's called the repetition effort, where we take a moderate approach to both the M, the mass, and the A, the acceleration. So that's our three primary methods. And those three methods, once again, are max effort, dynamic effort, or repetition effort, okay? So how I think about it is, if you're training, it kind of depends on how many days a week can you train. But let's say we can only do 2 days per week, all right? So if we can only do 2 days per week, okay, we know we're gonna do whole body movements, okay? So whole body movements, just to make it very simple, pick a leg exercise, an upper push exercise, and an upper pull exercise. And then those are your movements. Keep them in there for the next 6 weeks, and then you can talk about potentially rotating out exercises. Anyway, one day you're going to emphasize heavier, max effort work. So think of this being like your heavy sets of 1 to 5. Now, I say that with caution. Don't just go out and do heavy singles all the time, because going back to our cooking analogy, by default, that's going to make the intensity sky high, the fatigue sky high, and now we're not going to get the cook time long enough, okay? So I like to say, when I'm saying max effort, I'm just talking relatively heavy. So think of it like a 7 to an 8 out of 10. And sets of 5 tend to work very well for most people. Occasionally you can recycle it down to sets of 3 and things like that. But anyway, that's going to be our max effort day. And then we'll pick 2 exercises on the back end that will support our primary upper and our primary lower movements, okay? And just do them as a superset, so what's known as back to back, then you rest, and then you hit it again, then you rest, and then you hit it one more time. So about 2 to 4 sets on your superset on the back end. So that's one day, okay? So we've done our heavy stuff, so our max effort stuff, and then we've followed it with our repetition effort stuff, which is generally going to be around sets of 8 to upwards of 20 reps per set. Now, the other day per week is we can take those exact same movements and we can focus with dynamic effort. So this is going to be things that are generally in the 1 to 5 rep range as well, but the load is much, much less. Think of it being like, if you're a numbers person, like 60% out of 60% of your 1RM, or if you don't test your 1RM, which is totally fine, then look at something like a 5 out of 10, but your intent is to move it as fast as you freaking can. And then if you want to get real technical with it, which is fun to do, is you can time yourself and see how long it takes you to accomplish the set. So anyway, that's your dynamic effort with those same exercises. So now we're just taking, hey, on one day of the week we had those exercises, but they were heavy. Now we're going to move them really, really fast with the sub-max load dynamic effort. And then we'll take, again, 2 exercises for a superset at the end of the workout. That'll be somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 4 sets for, again, 8 to 20 reps. So think of it like this. You've got your 3 main lifts, your lower body movement, upper push, upper pull. Those are going to be done max effort and dynamic effort. And then we've picked 2 movements for your superset of repetition effort on day A, and then 2 different repetition effort movements on day B. So that's one way you can lay out a week. That's just a sample. So if you can only train twice per week, go with that. But the idea is we're going in with clear intent and a game plan, and we are going to generally work on compound movements. The isolation stuff, we will do either some isolation movements as a warm-up, or we can do it as a cool down, or if we just want to have a recovery day, that would be a good time to do some isolation type movements as well. So that's just one way to get into this stuff. But so far, we've just talked about our 3 primary methods, which are going to be max effort, dynamic effort, and repetition effort. And we've also talked about one of the principles, and we'll continue learning those principles each week. I just don't want to spit too much right now because it'll overwhelm you. But first and foremost, homework is this, all right? Do the Limber 11, do the Agile 8, get looser. You should start looking into, just go to YouTube, follow along with some yoga classes. Those are tremendous. Another thing you can do is go to YouTube, and you actually have to type this one out. Type in dynamic neuromuscular stabilization. If you just type in DNS, that will bring up a whole bunch of computer coding and all sorts of confusing stuff. So you actually have to spell it out. Dynamic neuromuscular stabilization. And then follow that with the word flow. So dynamic neuromuscular stabilization flow. And you'll see what I'm talking about. It's essentially dynamic yoga. It's tremendous for helping you get loosened up. So if we're laying out the week, a 7-day microcycle week, it's going to be pick a day where you go heavy, followed by some rep work. Pick a day where you go lighter but pretty fast, followed by some rep work. And you can have a bro day, which is just your isolation movements of, curls, tricep press downs, abs, calves, whatever. Perform that in a circuit. Then have a day where you do nothing but recovery. And then have another day or 2 or 3 where it's a lot of zone 2 work. Zone 2 is basically where we're below 140 beats per minute while exercising. So we're in that 110 to 140 beats per minute. So that helps with long-term heart health, but also it helps with recovery as well without fatiguing you too much. So anyway, let me know what questions you guys have, and each week I'll drop one of these videos, maybe 2 if it tends to be too long-winded. But you guys control this thing. You tell me what you want to know more about, what you want to learn more about, and that will kind of control the ebb and the flow of this thing. So tell your friends about this Inner Circle thing, invite them on in, and I'm trying to think, there was one more piece I had there. Yeah, I will also, make sure you guys get involved in the Q&A and shoot me a message anytime, and I'll get back to you as soon as I see it. Generally, that's going to be 24 to 48 hours, and I'll respond within the group, so that way it hits everybody, because there's probably a lot of other people who have the same questions. And then also, let me know in the comments what your guys' thoughts are on this. But I was thinking, because Discord has I can do a live Q&A and a live training section. Let me know, if that's something you guys want, and I'm more than happy to set aside a day per week where we have live Q&A going back and forth. If that's something you want, great. Also, let me know best days and times that work for you. The best days for me are always going to be Friday, because I work remotely on Fridays. So that doesn't mean that's when I have to do it. I can certainly work around you guys, but just let me know if that's something you want to do and when works best, and we'll go from there. All right, have a good week, guys.